This morning, the government announced, in response to what has been widespread concern, and for our next guest, a matter he's commented on at length before the election and since, in his capacity, I think, as the Minister of Resources, and that is New Zealand's electricity supply and its prices. So they go together. Whether or not we are going to have sufficient electricity generated in this country to meet demand on the one hand, and obviously the price at which that is made available to us. Now, last winter we almost had a brownout. We didn't, as a result, though, of paying out people like Methanex not to produce and Tiwai Point to stop producing as much as they were so that they could let their electricity go back into the grid, or we could use their gas quota. But today, and the government set off to go and get an independent review of the New Zealand electricity market and what would be needed to make it work better under an electricity market reform package. Well, the review came back, and I'd have to say, on the basis of the media that I've read so far and the reports that I've read, it would appear that most of the recommendations of the independent international review were not taken up, another word would be rejected, and that only a couple or two or three were. But I said at the start of the program today, the reforms announced seemed remarkably timid given the rhetoric that preceded them. And it seemed that Energy Minister Simon Watts and Finance Minister Nicola Willis are really into, tinkering around the edges without necessarily solving the problem of either supply or, it has to be said, of price. We will see, though. Shane Jones, who's been very, very vocal on this matter, in fact, I think he even floated the idea, he wasn't suggesting it seriously, he was saying, gosh, it wouldn't be a bad idea. The reforms haven't worked, and they haven't worked. I was there when they were put together, and I said they wouldn't work, and that was sitting in a National Party caucus in the early 1990s. But there you go. But the reforms, he was even talking, Shane Jones, about renationalising electricity, which I think a lot of people would, no matter whether they were free marketeers or not, have some degree of sympathy for. Anyhow, Shane joins us now. Welcome to the show, Minister. Lovely to have you on.
Hey, greetings from Kaitaia.
Kaitaia. Is it? Oh, you're the warmest part of the country at the moment, apparently, according to the latest.
Yeah. Well, it's living up to the winterless north reputation today. But look, there's a massive gathering up here of the Maori Women's Welfare League, and they've been great supporters of Winston's and over the years. So I am, not far from Kaitaia, and been taking a role in welcoming them to the very far north. But anyhow, nice to talk to you.
No, but good on you for doing that too. They've done a lot of good in the world over the last few, decades, generations even.
Indeed, they have, yep.
Listen, Shane, I have read, we've talked about the electricity. There is a suggestion that the electricity market's broken in New Zealand. The reports come in from overseas that says, it's not very good. But then we've seen this reaction today. Can I ask you, from a New Zealand First point of view, is this what you wanted to happen?
Well, the report, called the Frontier Report, was put together by some Aussie consultants. And parts of that report did call for the Crown to set up a dedicated agency and take control of that part of the power industry which relies on gas and coal, which we would call firming power or fossil fuel power. Now, I don't draw that moral distinction that tends to come from the shrillness of the Green movement. And what happened was that when the last election was completed, obviously New Zealand First, we didn't get the energy portfolio, although we did get portfolios that expose us to the downside of energy prices going haywire and energy policy not delivering an affordable or secure level of output. So there's always been a different approach that New Zealand First has taken and it's been more from the consumer end and less from the insider or the investor end. And you know how this system works. You introduce your ideas, and I wrote a paper for Winston about 15, 20 odd pages 2 or 3 months ago, and we distributed that to our political colleagues and to stakeholders in the community and in industry so they could see where we're coming from. But, collective responsibility and whatnot, so that's why the Finance Minister and the Minister of Energy, they've led these announcements today. And as we move forward to the next election, then obviously each party will give greater clarity for the public as to what they think should happen. Now, no one listening to your show has any doubt that I believe that manufacturing is imperiled. We're running the risk of the Rust Belt. And we have relied on what are called gentailers, and that system was put in place by Max Bradford. And it's run its race from the view of... I don't even think it's about me any longer. It's about the household consumers and the manufacturing consumers and the industry consumers. That's before we deal with the reality of more demand coming on our system due to either data centers or other technology-based users.
Yes. Okay. So there's been portrayed in some quarters this morning the government's energy reforms as a cowardly capitulation to the gentailers. I don't know if you'd use the word cowardly, but I think you might, from what I'm hearing you say. The gentailers' lobbying seems to have won the day, Shane.
Well, yeah, I'm not, as you worked out, I'm not the energy minister, but I did warn the gentailers that time is passing and social license is really important. And if we have a situation where they're incapable or disinterested in delivering affordable energy prices, then force is bigger, and what they believe is under their control will, in my view, come to the fore.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've been quoted in the past, and you are the Associate Energy Minister, but I've read you say the gentailers are not offering security; they exist to offer net profit after tax. I don't imagine your views changed since you uttered those words.
No, not at all. I mean, the things that I'm responsible for, like the $200 million that we're going to be using to accelerate the delivery of gas, we're doing as I speak. The things I'm responsible for, the re-establishment of the New Zealand-based coal industry, that's already happening. And so I'm the sort of guy in politics, when you've got power, use it, don't occupy it. I'm all about using power.
I understand that, and I understand that you won't agree necessarily with today's decision either, and your hint that it'll still be an issue for the campaign trail next year. Fair enough. But it's interesting that successive governments, Shane, both Labour and National, have stopped from breaking up the gentailers or treating power as a public utility, which is what you'd like to see. What I'm struggling here because New Zealanders are sympathetic to that idea. That's what the polls also indicate to us. I'm struggling to understand why there isn't systemic change of a system that seems to be failing.
Yeah, well, I mean, these entities are now listed on the share market, and there's always a lot of nervousness about upsetting the share market. But you see, I step back and I look at society like this. There's 5 odd million people, and there's a narrow range of investors, some KiwiSaver, some other syndicates of savers who may or may not be upset if you do create disharmony in the share market world. But you have to contrast that perceived disharmony with what's happening in the real economy. And you could form a view that, okay, firms are disappearing, manufacturing is changing, or it's disappearing altogether. And that's just the inevitable structural adjustment that any economy has to tolerate. But that's That's not what New Zealand First believes in. We don't believe in the Rust Belt. We don't believe that all these little towns should suffer permanent damage, which is traceable back to the need to recapitalise businesses and buy new machinery and buy new plant and capital assets. But no one's going to do that if they're not confident about the cost of electricity going forward. And if they're owned by international investors, then they'll just take their capital and bugger off somewhere else.
The suggestion is that if Nicola Willis writes a letter to the boards of, in particular, Meridian, Genesis and Mercury, which are all majority state-owned, they'll now start to invest in productive capacity. Do you think a letter will do the job, Shane?